Forensic Ballistics Reviewer. Definition of terms. ACP, automatic cold pistol. Action, the working mechanism of a firearm. An action is the physical mechanism that manipulates cartridges and or seals the breech. Air gun, a gun that uses compressed air or gas to propel a projectile. Also called air rifle, pellet gun, and gun. Air resistance, drag, decelerates the projectile with a force proportional to the square of the velocity. Ammunition, shall mean loaded shell rifle, muskets, carbine, shotguns. Revolver and pistol from which a bullet, ball, shot, shell, or other missiles may be fired by means of a gunpowder or other explosives. Anvil, an internal metal component in a boxer primer assembly, against which the priming mixture is crushed by the firing pin blow. Anvil marks, a term generally used by the military for a cartridge with a full metal jacketed bullet or solid metal projectile. Armalite, occasionally, the home of manufacturing company becomes almost a generic term. It happens with the Colt-produced M16, which has been designed and developed at Armalite. The Armalite business was formed by Charles Dorchester and George Sullivan in 1950. Armalite employed Eugene Stoner, chief engineer and one of the top designer of the country. Automatic, when the mechanism is so arranged that it will fire continuously when the trigger is depressed. Automatic action type, a firearm design that feeds cartridges fires and ejects cartridge cases as long as the trigger is fully depressed and there is cartridge available in the feed system. Barrel, metal tube through which the projectiles travel. Berthold Schwarz, the inventor of gunpowder. His real name is Konstantin Anklitzen, a Franciscan monk in the town of Freiburg, in Germany. Blowback, in firearm, an automatic and semi-automatic firearm design that directly utilizes the breech pressure exerted on the head of the cartridge cases to actuate the mechanism. In ammunition, a leakage of gas reward between the case and chamber wall from the mouth of the case. Bolt action type, a firearm in which the breech closure is 1. In line with the bore at all times. 2. Manually reciprocated to load, unload, and cock. 3. And is locked in place by breech bolt lugs and engaging abutments, usually in the receiver. Bore, the interior of the barrel of a gun or firearm. Breech face, is the front part of the breech block that makes contact with the cartridge in a firearm. The breech block, or breech block, in a gun is what holds a round in the chamber, and absorbs the recoil of the cartridge when the round is fired, preventing the cartridge case from moving. Broach cutter, used to create a rifling impressions on a barrel. Broach, gang, a tool having a series of cutting edges of slightly increasing height used to cut the spiral grooves in a barrel. All grooves are cut with a single pass of the broach. Broach, single, a non-adjustable rifling cutter which cuts all the grooves simultaneously, and is in a series of increasing dimensions until the desired groove depth is achieved. Browning, J.M., born in 1855. Started the production of single-shot rifle that was adopted by Winchester. Buckshot, coarse lead shot used in shotgun shells. Lead pellets, ranging in size from 0.20 inches to 0.36 inch diameter normally. Loaded in shot shells. Buffer, in a firearm, any part intended to absorb shock and check recoil. Bullet, a projectile propelled from the firearm. A metallic or non-metallic cylindrical projectile. Originated from the French word boulette, a small ball. In common police PAR lane, a bullet may be called slug. Two basic types of commercial bullets in common use today. 1. Lead bullets are used in almost all revolver ammunition, and in some low or medium powder rifle cartridges. Are produced in automatic swedging machine from extruded wire, containing the proper percentage of tin and antimony for hardening. 2. Jacketed bullets are used for automatic pistols ammunition, and medium and high power rifle ammunition. The most common are those from the blowback .25 ACP, .380 ACP, 9mm Luger, .45 ACP, automatic Colt pistol, and several types of high velocity .30s. These are all made automatically by swedging a cup of metal around a lead core. Armor-piercing bullets is pointed flat base bullet with gliding metal jacket. The core is of pointed, boat-tailed shape, and is made of hardened tungsten, chrome steel, and has a blackened tip. Used to penetrate armored cars and vehicles. Tracer bullet, when fired, emit a light red flame from its base, thereby showing the gunner the trace of flame, the path as well as the striking point of the bullet, the flame continuing to burn and trace for about 600 yards. These are intended primarily for machine gun use and can be seen by day and night. The point of the bullet colored red is for identification. These are used only in the military service, and were never sold to individuals. Should an individual obtain one or more of these cartridges, he should at once return it to military control or else dispose of these by throwing into a deep river or lake, as they are exceedingly dangerous to have around. This should never be monkeyed with, and particularly no attempt should be made to unload them for examination, as these may ignite and cause exceedingly serious burn or fire. The ingredients used in tracer and igniter mixtures are confidential. Incendiary bullet is similar in construction to a tracer bullet, but the composition contained in the cavity burns fiercely impact with a very hot flame which will quite reliably ignite anything that the bullet strikes. For identification purposes, the incendiary bullet has a light blue color. The same precaution should be observed as with tracer cartridges. Dum-dum bullet, this word and type of bullet were invented by British Ordnance Force stationed at their arsenal at Dum-dum, India. The British Army was engaged in extensive punitive expedition on the northwest frontier of India, fighting against Afghan and Pathan tribesmen. It soon developed that such a full jacketed bullet was of no practical effect against primitive natures. So the English made some of these bullets expanding by grinding of the nose of the jacketed bullet. These are now known as hollow point bullet and soft point bullet. Gas check bullet, to prevent the melting of the base, lead. Bullets intended to be fired at higher velocity have their gases protected with a small copper cups. The bullet is cast with a slightly tapering base, and the copper gas chalk is then pressed lightly on the bore, the cup remaining on the bullet when it is fired. Wad cutter bullet, a cylindrical bullet design having a sharp shouldered nose intended to cut target paper clearly to facilitate easy and accurate soaring. Wax bullet, a bullet made from paraffin and other wax preparation usually used for short-range indoor target shooting. Marks found of fired bullets. 1. Landmarks, depressed portion caused by the lands. 2. Groove marks, raised on elevated portions caused by the grooves. 3. Skid marks, when the bullet enters the rifled bore from a stationary position and is forced abruptly into the rifling, its natural tendency is to go straight toward before encountering the regular rifling twist. 4. Slippage marks, bullets fired from a worn-out barrel. Oily barrels and slightly oversized bullets. 5. Shaving marks, most commonly these marks are found on the bullets fires from a revolver due to a poor alignment of the cylindrical with the bore. Identification of a bullet, principles. 1. No two barrels are microscopically identical as the surfaces of their bores all possess individual and characteristics on their own. 2. When a bullet is fired from a rifled barrel, it becomes engraved by the riflings, and this engraving will vary in its minute details with every individual bore. So it happens that the engravings on the bullet fired from one barrel will be different from that on a similar bullet fired from another barrel. And conversely, the engraving on bullets fired from the same barrel will be the same. 3. Every barrel leaves its thumb marks on every bullet which is fired through it, just as every breech face leaves its thumb marks on the base of every fired cartridge case. Test bullet, a bullet fired from a bullet recovery system for comparison analysis. Bullet recovery system, any method which will allow the undamaged recovery of a fired bullet. Differing systems are needed for different cartridges depending upon bullet composition, jacket thickness, and velocity. Water tanks and cotton boxes are most commonly in use. Bullet splash, the spatter and fragmentation of a bullet upon impacting a hard surface. Bullet wipe, the discolored area on the immediate periphery of a bullet hole, caused by bullet lubricant, lead, smoke, bore debris, or possible jacket material. Sometimes called burnishing or leaded edge. Button, a hardened metal plug, called a button, with a rifled cross. Section configuration. It is pushed or pulled through a drilled end. Reamed barrel so as to cold form the spiral grooves to the desired depth and twist. When the carbide button was first introduced, it was described as a swaging process or swaged rifling. Caliber, the diameter of the bore of a rifled firearm. The caliber is usually expressed in hundredths of an inch or millimeters. Land to land, the way to determine the caliber of a gun is to measure the diameter of the bore from land to land. Cane gun, knife pistols, many devices primarily designed for another purposes will have a gun mechanism incorporated in them, also known as freakish device. Cannelure, a circumferential groove generally of a knurled or plane appearance on a bullet or cartridge. These three uses including crimping, lubrication and identification. Cartridge, a term to describe a complete unfired unit, consisting of bullet, primer, cartridge case, and gunpowder. Test cartridge case, a cartridge case obtained while test firing a firearm in a laboratory to be used for comparison or analysis. Function of cartridge cases. 1. It holds the bullet, gunpowder and primer. 2. It serves as a waterproof container for the gunpowder. 3. It prevents the escape of gases to the rear. Marks found on cartridge cases. 1. Firing pin impression, the indentation in the primer of a tentative cartridge case or in the rim of a rim face. Cartridge case cause when it is struck by the firing pin. 2. Breech face markings, negative impression of the breech face of the firearm found on the head of the cartridge case after firing. 3. Chamber marks, individual microscope marks placed upon a cartridge case by the chamber wall as a result of any of the following: A. Chambering. B. Expanding during firing. C. Extraction. 4. Extractor marks, tool marks produced upon a cartridge case. Form contact with the extractor. These are usually found on or just ahead of the rim. 5. Ejector marks, tool marks produced upon a cartridge or cartridge case on the head, generally at or near the rim. Form contact with the ejector. Cape gun, a doubled-barreled shoulder arm with barrel side by side, one being smoothbore and the other being rifled. Case head, the base of the cartridge case which contains the primer. Cast off, the offset of the butt of a firearm to the right-handed shooter end to the right for a left-handed shooter. Cast on, the offset of the butt of a firearm to the left for a right-handed shooter end to the right for a left-handed shooter. Chamber, the rear part of the barrel bore that has been formed to accept a specific cartridge. Revolver cylinders are multi-chambered. Cock, place a firing mechanism under a spring tension. Raise the cock of a gun in order to make it ready for firing. Full cock, the position of the hammer or strike when the firearm is ready to fire. Compensator, muzzle brake, a device attached to or integral with the muzzle end of the barrel to utilize propelling gases for counter recoil. CETME, Centro dos Estudios Técnicos de Materiales Especiales. This is Spanish government weapon development agency, based in Madrid. Class characteristics are those characteristics which are determinable only after the manufacture of the firearm. They are characteristics whose existence is beyond the control of man and which have random distribution. Their existence in the firearms is brought about by the tools in their normal operations resulting through wear and tear, abuse, mutilation, corrosion, erosion, and other fortuitous causes. Classification of cartridge according to rim. 1. Rim type, the diameter of the rim is greater than the diameter of the body of the cartridge case, e.g. caliber 0.38 and caliber 0.22. 2. Semi-rim type, the diameter of the rim is slightly greater than the diameter of the body of the cartridge case, e.g. caliber 0.25. 32. Auto. Super 0.38. 3. Rimless type, the diameter of the rim is equal to the body of the cartridge case, e.g. caliber 0.5, 0.56 mm, 0.30, 0.9 mm, 0.45. 4. Rebate type, the diameter of the rim is smaller than the body of the cartridge case, e.g. caliber 8 mm x 59. 5. Belted type, there is a protruding metal around the body of the cartridge case near the rim, e.g. caliber 338 Magnum 13.9 x 39. Colt. Samuel Colt was born on July 1814 and was to be instrumental in making the revolver a practical type of pistol. Cylinder, storage for ammunition in a revolver, the cylinder rotates as the action is cocked. Damascus, an obsolete barrel-making process. The barrel is formed by twisting or braiding together steel and iron wires or bars. Sometimes called laminated barrel. Derringer, Henry, born in the beginning of 19th century. Worked at Philadelphia where he manufactured pocket pistol. Drilling, refers to a combination gun that has 3 barrels. Ejector rod, metal rod used to help with the removal of the cartridges. Energy bullet, the capacity of a projectile to do work. Firearms identification, a discipline mainly concerned with determining whether a bullet or cartridge was fired by a particular weapon. Firing pin, is a lightweight part, which serves to transfer energy from a spring-loaded hammer to the primer, while a striker is usually heavier, and is directly connected to the spring providing the energy to impact the primer. Flare guns, used in cases such as sending signals and enabling to see enemies in the dark. Forensic ballistics, a scientific study of firearm identification with the use of laboratory examination. The subject gives emphasis on the study of ammunitions, projectiles, gunpowder, primer and explosives, including the use of the bullet comparison microscope. It also deals with the principles in the microscopic and macroscopic examination of firearm evidence and the preparation of reports for legal proceedings in the solution of cases involving firearms. Types of problems in forensic ballistics. 1. Given a bullet to determine the caliber and type of firearm from which it was fired. 2. Given fired cartridge case, to determine the caliber and type of firearm from which it was fired. 3. Given a bullet in a suspected firearm, to determine whether or not the bullet was fired from the suspected firearm. 4. Given a fired cartridge case, a suspected firearm, to determine whether or not the cartridge was fired from the suspected firearm. 5. Given 2 or more bullets, to determine whether or not they were fired from only one firearm. 6. Given 2 or more cartridge cases, to determine whether or not they were fired. Equipment used in a ballistics laboratory. 1. Comparison microscope. This valuable instrument is specially designed to permit the firearm examiner to determine the similarity and dissimilarity between 2 fired bullets or 2 fired cartridge cases by simultaneously observing their magnified image. It is actually 2 microscope coupled together with a single or 2 eyepiece, so that when one looks through this comparison eyepiece, he is seeing one half of what is under the other, in other words, half of the evidence bullet and half of the test bullet. 2. Stereoscope microscope. This is generally used in the preliminary examination of fired bullets and fired shells to determine the location of the extractor marks and ejector marks for orientation purposes. It can be used also in 1. Close-up examination of tampered serial numbers of firearms. 3. Comparison projector, CP6. This is generally used in the preliminary examination of fired bullets and fired shells to determine the location of the extractor marks and ejector marks for orientation purposes. It can be used also in 1. Close-up examination of tampered serial numbers of firearms. 4. Bullet recovery box, for obtaining best fired bullet or test fired cartridge cases from the suspected firearms submitted to the ballistics laboratory. In test firing suspected firearms, it is standard procedure to use ammunition that are of the same caliber, make or brand and manufactured in the same year with that of the evidence bullet or shell. Water is one of the means to obtain test bullets and test shells because the microscope marks on the cylindrical or peripheral surface of the bullets are preserved for good used. The same is true with cotton. 5. Measuring projector, MP6. This projector determines the width of the lands, width of grooves, diameter and twist of fired bullets. 6. Vernier caliper. This instrument determines the bullet diameter and barrel length. 7. Analytical balance. This more or less determines the weight of the bullets, shots, and pellets for possible type, caliber, and make for firearm from which they were fired. 8. Taper gauge, used for determining the diameter of the bore of the firearms. 9. Onoscope, for examining the interior surface of the barrel. 10. Helixometer, for measuring the pitch of the rifling pitch. of rifling is the distance advanced by the rifling in one complete turn or a distance traveled by the bullet in one complete turn. 11. Chronograph, for determining the speed of the bullet or the muzzle velocity of the bullet. Fouling, the residual deposits remaining in the bore of a firearm after firing. Garand, John C., was born in North Carolina in 1818. Developed the hang-ranked machine gun, a development of Duva or Gatling type of machine gun. Gas guns, these will be found in all shapes and sizes and used for firing tear gas and other forms of disabling gases. Gas-operated, an automatic or semi-automatic firearm in which the propellant gases are used to unlock the breech bolt and then to complete the cycle of extracting and expecting. Gas port, an opening in the wall of a barrel to allow gas to operate a mechanism or reduce recoil. Grip, handle of the handgun. Gunpowder, any of the various powder used in firearms as propellant. Charge. Types of gunpowder. 1. Black powder, consists of the jet black and rather shiny grains. Although black powder has been in use for about 6 centuries, and although methods of manufacture are naturally led to greater efficiency in action, its composition has remained practically the same in all countries. 2. Smokeless powder, a mixture of nitrocellulose 60 parts, nitroglycerin 35 parts and Vaseline 5 parts. These substances are almost entirely smokeless in action. They are all given the generic term of nitro powders and are legion in number. All nitro powders used in rifles, pistols, and revolvers are a gelatinized powder, that is, they are made by forming dough into sticks or grains. The identification of partially burnt powder grains may become a matter of vital importance, since such grains may be found around the entrance hole of a wound, and it will obviously help if the type of powder can be identified from these unburnt grains. Hammer, part that strikes the primer to cause ignition. Hammerly, Johann Ulrich. Hammerly weapons has always been the epitome of Swiss precision engineering ability. Handgun, a revolver or a pistol.
Harpoon guns, barbed spear in hunting large fish. Head space is the distance measured from the part of the chamber that stops forward motion of the cartridge, the datum reference, to the face of the bolt. Head stamp, numerals, letters, and symbols stamped into the head of the cartridge case or shot shell to identify the manufacture, caliber, gauge, or give additional information. Heckler & Koch. Edmund Heckler has been a plant manager with Mauser, and Alex Seidel a designer with Mauser. Hook, a cutting tool which cuts has hook shape and only cuts one grooves at a time. Keyhole, an oblong or an oval hole in a target that is produced by an unstable bullet striking the target at an oblique angle to the bullet's longitudinal axis. Leading, the accumulation of lead in the bore of a firearm from the passage of lead shot or bullet. Also called metal fouling. Lever action type, a design wherein the breech mechanism is cycled by an external lever generally below the receiver. Liberator, made by the U.S. government for use in occupied countries in Europe during the recent war and fired the .45 ACP cartridge. Single shot and smooth bore. Lubaloy, is a wrought copper alloy that is composed mainly of copper and zinc. In 1922, the Western Cartridge Company introduced a copper-washed bullet jacketing called Lubaloy, which stands for lubricating alloy. Lubaloy replaced standard bullet jacketing, which had been cupro-nickel coated steel or solid cupro-nickel. Lugger, George, was born in Australia in 1849. He did lasting designed work in connection with 9mm parabellum cartridge. Machine gun type, primarily used only in military combat and will seldom be encountered by the firearms technician. Machine markings, a cross-section of a gun barrel will show small grooves or striations all along the lands and grooves. Marlin, John Malin, New Haven, Connecticut, manufacturer of lever action rifle, 1800s. Mauser, Paul and Wilhelm brothers produced parts of the rifle which had been adopted by the German government in 1871. Mossberga, Oscar, born in Sweden in 1866 and went to the United States. the maker of high-quality .22 rifles, sporting rifles and pump-action shotguns. Mosin, Sergei, Colonel of Russia Army. Designated in Russian service. Rifle in 1891. Multi-barreled guns, in particular one will find guns having the 3 or 4 barrels are mounted in one receiver. Some may have a combination of several different gauges of shotguns, or a combination of shotgun barrels and rifle barrel. Muzzle, the end of the barrel through which the bullet exits. Muzzle energy, is the kinetic energy of a bullet as it is expelled from the muzzle of a firearm. It is often used as a rough indication of the destructive potential of a given firearm or load. Nambu Kijiro, an army gun officer designer. His first design was produced by the Kayaba factory in 1904. Paradox, an obsolete barrel designed in which the major length of the barrel is smooth and last few inches are rifled. Pen gun, a small caliber firearm shaped like a pen or pencil. Powder, commonly used term for the propellant in a cartridge or shot shell. Pressure, in a firearm, the force developed by the expanding gases generated by the combustion of the propellant. Primer, the ignition components of cartridge primers are used for igniting prominent. A blow from the firing pin of the firing cup compresses the priming composition to detonate. This detonation produces a flame which passes through the vent of flesh hole in the cartridge case, igniting the gunpowder. Composition of a primer: 1 potassium chlorate, 45%, 2 antimony sulfide, 23%, 3 fulminate of mercury, 32%. Proof mark, a distinctive symbol stamped into the metal of the barrel or other part of a firearm to indicate that testing of the part bearing the stamp by firing proof loads has been carried out. Proof test is a form of stress test to demonstrate the fitness of a load-bearing structure. The firing of a deliberate overload to test the strength of a firearm barrel in action. Ratchet, a notched wheel on the rear of a revolver cylinder to rotate when a force is applied by a level hold a hand. Recoil, often called knockback, kickback, or simply kick, is the backward momentum of a gun when it is discharged. In technical terms, the recoil caused by the gun exactly balances the forward momentum of the projectile and exhaust gases, ejecta, according to Newton's third law. Reload, a cartridge, which have been reassembled with a new primer, powder and/or other components. Repeating arms, this type is loaded with more than cartridge into the chamber when it is fired, rather having to perform this operation by hand. Resizing, the reduction in diameter of a fire cartridge case to unfired diameter by forcing it into die of smaller size than the fired case. Ricochet, is a rebound, bounce or skip off a surface, particularly in the case of a projectile. Rifling, refers to helical grooves in the barrel of a gun or firearm, which imparts a spin to a projectile around its long axis. Types of riflings. 1 stair type, 4 lands, 4 grooves, right hand twist end. Lands or equal widths, 4 Rg equals L, used in earlier self-loading pistols. 2 Smith & Wesson type, 5 lands and 5 grooves, right hand twist and lands of equal width, 5 Rg equals L. 3 Browning type, 6 lands, 6 grooves, right hand twist. Narrow lands and broad grooves. 6 Rg2x. 4 Colt type, 6 lands and 6 grooves, left hand twist, narrow lands and broad grooves. 6 Lg2x. 5 Webley type, 7 lands, 7 grooves, right hand twist. Narrow lands and broad grooves. 7 Rg3x. 6 Army type, 4 lands and 4 grooves, right hand twist. Narrow lands and broad grooves. 4 Rg3x. Round, a military term for a cartridge. Scrape, a cutting tool which cuts 2 opposing grooves at a time. Shocking power, the ability of a projectile to dissipate its kinetic energy effectively in a target. Shot, a small ball or pellet of lead, a number of which are loaded in a cartridge and used for one charge of a shotgun. Birdshot, the smallest size of shot for sporting rifles or other guns. Shot shell, a cartridge containing projectile designed to be fired in a shotgun. The cartridge body may be metal, plastic, or paper. Semi-automatic type, a firearm requiring a separate pull of the trigger for each shot fired, and which uses the energy of discharge to perform a portion of the operating or firing cycle. Serial number, a number applied to a firearm in order to identify the individual firearm. Shell, an explosive artillery projectile or bomb. Identification of shells, principles. 1. The breech face and striker of every single firearm leave microscopically individualities of their own. 2. The firearm leaves its fingerprints or thumb mark on every cartridge case which it fires. 3. The whole principle of identification is based on the fact that since the breech face of every weapon must be individually distinct, the cartridge cases which it fires are imprinted with this individuality. The imprint on all cartridge cases fired from the same weapon are always the same, those on cartridge cases fired from different weapons must always be different. Shotgun, a smoothbore gun for firing small shot at short range. A single-barreled shotgun, it is loaded with a single shotgun cartridge, closed, fired and then reloaded by the shooter. B. Double-barreled shotgun, the two barrels may be side by side, or they may be one over the other. Each barrel may have its own trigger. C. Pump-action shotgun, operates in the same manner as a slide-action rifles, by means of sliding lever under the barrel. D. Auto-loading shotguns, these are the same as auto-loading or self-loading rifles in that the recoil action reloads the gun. Form the magazine without any effort on the part of the shooter. SIG, Schweizerisch Industrie Cecil Schaff, adopted by the Swiss government as their standard service weapon. The company started to produce railway engines and carriage in 1853. Side lock, a design in which the firing mechanism is attached to a side plate rather than being integral with the frame. Sight, device used for aiming. Silencer, a device attached to the barrel of the firearm to reduce the noise of discharge. Also called sound suppressor. Single-shot firearms, those type of firearms that is designated to shoot only one shot. Slide-action type, a firearm which features a movable forearm which is manually actuated in motion parallel to the barrel by the shooter. Forearm motion is transmitted to a breech block assembly which performs all the function of the firing cycle assigned to it by the design. Also known as pump action. Sling, a strap fastened to a firearm to assist in carrying or to steady it during firing. A sling may also refer to a projectile weapon typically used to throw a blunt projectile such as a stone, clay or lead sling bullet. Slug, a projectile generally fired from a shotgun, either one large piece of lead or several smaller caliber pieces. Rifled slug, a simple projectile in spiral grooves and hollow base, intended to use in shotgun. The slug will rotate, and thus reach its target much more accurate. Smith & Wesson, Horace Smith and Daniel B. Wesson formed a partnership in 1852. They manage by producing what is probably the best double-action revolver in the world. Daniel Wesson left the company to set up his own firearm business. Smoke ring, the circular gray deposits around the face of the chamber of a revolver produced by gunpowder residues upon discharge. Stock, also known as a shoulder stock, a buttstock, or simply a butt, is a part of a rifle or other firearm, to which the barrel and firing mechanism are attached, that is held against one's shoulder when firing the gun. Striations, strii, when a bullet is fired through a rifled barrel. The raised and lowered spirals of the rifling etch fine grooves called striations into the bullet. Characteristics of striations depend upon the factors. 1. The size and shape of the microscopic irregularities on the acting tool. 2. The original surface smoothness of the object acted upon. 3. Relative hardness of the two materials. 4. Speed of application or rate of relative motion. 5. Pressure areas involved. 6. Texture and uniformity of material acted upon. Submachine type is a light, portable machine gun which uses pistol size ammunition. It differs from a pistol in it that has a shoulder stock which may or may not fold but is designed to be fired by the use of both hands. Swage, an internal mandrel with rifling configuration which forms rifling in the barrel by means of the external hammering. Also known as hammer forging. Tattooing, small hemorrhagic marks on the skin produced by the impact of gunpowder particles also called stripling. Thompson, John, born in 1860 in Newport, Kentucky. Designed the Thompson submachine gun in 1920. Thumb rest, a ledge in the grip area of a rifle or handgun in which to rest the thumb of the trigger hand. Trailing edge, the edge of a land or groove impression in a fire bullet which is opposites the driving edge of the same land or groove impressions. Trajectory, the curved path of a projectile from muzzle to target. Trap door, an action in which a top-hinged breech block pivots up and forward to open. Locking on this action is accomplished by a cam located at the rear of the breech block that fits into a mating recess, also known as a cam lock. Trigger is a mechanism that actuates the firing of firearms. Trigger guard is a loop surrounding the trigger of a firearm and protecting it from accidental discharge. Trigger pull, the amount of force which must firearm to cause sear release. Tokarev, Fedor, born in Igorlik in 1971. Designed the service pistol of the Soviet forces. Tool marks identification is a discipline of forensic science which has, as its primary concern to determine if a tool mark was produced by a particular tool. Two general type of tool marks. One impression type, which as its name implies a little more than a bent. A pry bar may leave an impression type mark on a window frame to which is applied the shape and the size of the mark, plus irregularities caused by nicks or breaks in the pry bar, may be such as to permit a positive statement as to its source. Two striated tool mark is left by a tool scraping over an object or surface softer than him. Thus, a pry bar which slips during the application may scraped over the jamb of a door, leaving striate. Tin snips or bolt cutter have blades which frequently leave striate on the edges of metal cut. An axe will leave striate on wood chips, as well as the auger or blade of a plane mechanical tool as a planer, joiner, and lathe all have blades and edges which leave striate on chips, shaving, and stock being worked. Many examples should be given, but these are typical if the tool most commonly encountered in the criminal investigations. Striated marks are often referred to as friction marks, abrasion marks or scratched marks. Tools. There are a number of tools using cartridges which are designed to drive studs, punch holes or cut tables. Such tools may be encountered in the investigation of an accident. Traps. These are designed to be set in the woods and left where animals will encounter them. They may fire a bullet or a poison charge, depending on their construction. Trigger, small lever that is pulled or squeezed to start the firing process. Trigger guard, piece that surrounds the trigger to protect it from being accidentally squeezed or bumped. Velocity, the speed of the projectile at a given point along its trajectory. Vierling, a four-barreled gun, typically with two identical shotgun barrels and with two rifle barrels of differing calibers. Built primarily in Germany and Austria. Walther, Karl, developed a reliable small-caliber automatic pistol in 1866. Walker test, the original chemical test for the detection of spatial distributions of nitrites in gunpowder residue. Winchester, Oliver, he led the formation of the Winchester Company. Types of cartridge case according to location of primer. 1 pinfire cartridge, the pin extend radially through the bead of the cartridge case into the primer. This type of cartridge is no longer used. 2 rimfire cartridge, the priming mixture is placed in the cavity formed in the rim of the head of the cartridge case. 3 centerfire cartridge, the primer cup is forced to the middle portion of the head of the cartridge case. 4 percussion, a means of ignition of propellant change by a mechanical blow against the primer or percussion cap. A low power, a cartridge giving a muzzle velocity of less than 1,850 feet/section. B. High power, a cartridge giving a muzzle velocity of between 1925 and 2500 feet/section. C. High intensity, a cartridge giving a muzzle velocity over 2500 feet/section. Yaw, the angle between longitudinal axis of a projectile and the line of the projectile trajectory. Zip guns, these may be in any form, since the name has been applied to all homemade guns. A great many of this class will be found to be exceedingly clever mechanisms and most effective weapon. Zwilling, European term for a double-barreled shoulder arm with one rifle and one smooth-bore barrel.